Hi everyone, you're here sewing with Cody and Pete, and in today's video we are working on block 8 of our Lazy Star Quilt Along. So hopefully most of y'all have been following along and enjoying all of the blocks as we work through them each week. So we've already completed the majority of the quilt. We've just got 3 more blocks left to do, and then we'll be working on finishing up the entire quilt and then maybe doing some quilting videos. But here is block 9. I'm sorry, block 9, not block 8. So here is where we're actually incorporating the third fabric. So we have our background fabric, but then we've got fabric A, fabric B. Now we're going to be incorporating fabric C. And for me, it's a cream fabric. I wanted something to add to differentiate between the background, but nothing too bold to take away from the other two colors. So if you haven't already, like and subscribe to the channel and the video, and let's get started on working on block 9. So here we are. I've already cut out all the pieces because we've already done 8 blocks already. So we've already gone over how to cut the squares, how to cut the large trapezoids and the small trapezoids. But you can see here, to complete one block, we need one 2.5 inch square from fabric A. We need 4 large trapezoids that are cut 2.5 inches from fabric A. We need 8 2.5 inch small trapezoids from fabric C. So this is our new color we're adding. And also from fabric C, we need 4 1.5 inch squares. So this is really the only different measurement, is this 1.5 inch square. And that 1.5 inch square is what's going to be used to construct this center square. Then we also need 8 2.5 inch small trapezoids from fabric B. And also from our background, which will be our 4 corners of block 9, we need 4 2.5 inch squares from our background fabric. So in my case, this is the white, this and this fabric C, which is my cream, and then our fabric A and B, which we've been using throughout the entire quilt. So once you have everything cut out, then the next thing we need to do is we need to mark these 1.5 inch squares. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to take our 6.5 inch ruler, or any ruler at this point, and we are going to draw a line from point to point. So we're drawing a diagonal line, and that's going to be our sew line. So these are going to go in each corner of this square, but we need a marking to know where to actually sew. So what we're going to do, we're going to take our ruler and we're going to line it from point to point, and we're going to draw, using our black friction pen, draw a line diagonal. And we're going to need to do that for all 4 squares. So now that we have all 4 1.5 inch squares with the line drawn diagonally, we could then start construction of the block. So what I did first was I started with my center block. So what we're going to do, we're going to sew one at a time. So we're going to line up this square in this corner, and we're going to sew along that line. And then we can press it towards the dark side. And we're going to do this for all 4 corners. So I'll do the first one, and then I'll come back and show you how we trim it up and press. Okay, so here we are. I'm back with my 2.5 inch fabric A piece sewn to my 1.5 inch square from fabric C. And I have it sewn along the black line we drew. So now what we're going to do, we're going to trim that corner off. And so I'm lining up the 1/4 inch marking on my 6.5 inch Creative Grid ruler along that sew line. So give me a nice crisp line, or a nice crisp cut. So here it's cut. So now we can press that back. And to be honest, you can pretty much finger press these as we go along, and when we're finished, we can go to the iron and press them all. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the opposite corner, and we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to sew along this line, trim it, and then press, and we'll do it to the other two corners. So let me go do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, so here we are. I finished. I sewed all my 4 squares together along the edge, and I trimmed them as I went along, and I just came back from the iron from pressing them flat. So this is our center block, and this should measure 2.5 inches, and this is done. So we can set that aside. So if you were making a whole bunch of these blocks, you could make all your centers first and just work that assembly line and get all that working and going. So then that's done, and it can be set up here with our 4 corner blocks of our background fabric, because those are just going to be sewn together when they're done. There's nothing that's going to be cut from those corner blocks. So now we can start working with our other 4 little blocks. And so these are all going to be working with these large trapezoids from our fabric A. So what we're going to do is they're going to be working with these guys. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to take all of these. So we're going to sew 1 to each of the large trapezoids. And then we're going to trim it and then sew the other one to the other side. So like we've done in previous videos, we're going to line our cut side of our trapezoid, our large and our small trapezoids. And you can go and pin these just like we've done in previous videos. And so you can go and do these for all of these trapezoids. So now that we've got all these pinned, so now we can go and sew. And I'll go and sew 1/4 inch like we always are doing along this cut edge for all 4 of them. Now I'll go press them, and then I'll come back and we're going to trim the other side of these trapezoids and sew the remainder small trapezoids from our fabric B onto that side. Okay, so we're back from sewing and pressing all of our pieces. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our lazy angle ruler, which we used to cut all of our pieces already, but now we're going to trim up this side to allow us to sew the 4 remainder pieces. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our piece and we're going to flip it upside down, and then we're going to take our ruler, we're going to line up the square with the 2.5 inch marking. So we'll line up the left side and the bottom side with the 2.5 inch marking. Then we'll cut. So then you'll end up with this guy. And so we're going to do this for all 4 pieces. So what we can also do, you know I like to trim those extra little pieces up here. Once we're finished cutting all these, we can go and trim these little dog ears. It'll just make the blocks look better and work a little easier for us, because it'll be cleaner. So I went and trimmed all these little pieces off. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take these large trapezoids and we're going to now attach the pieces on the new cut side. So we'll pin all these together and we'll go to the sewing machine and we'll sew them together. And we're almost there. All right, so we've got all of our four pieces pinned. So let's go sew them, and I'll press them, and I'll be right back. All right, so we're back. So we've got all four pieces sewn. So now we need to trim them again. So we can go and clean up these little triangles just because it makes me happy. So now we're going to use our lazy angle ruler, and we're going to trim up the sides here, because now we're going to attach our piece C. And it's going to look something like this when it's done. See? So what we're going to do is we're going to cut one side at a time and sew. So we're going to take our ruler again, and again using the 2.5 inch markings, lining up the sides and the bottom, and we're going to trim. And we're going to do this for all four pieces. So we're going to attach piece C to that side. All right, so they're all trimmed. So now we're going to sew these pieces, well, each one of piece C of a small trapezoid to the large trapezoid of piece A and B. So I'll go pin and I'll go sew these together, and we're moving right along. All right, so I'm back. So now we've got piece C sewn to the right side of our blocks. So now we're going to trim this side. So we'll flip them over using our lazy angle ruler. Again, just like before, lining up the 2.5 inch markings. We'll trim, and now we will sew this piece to this side, and then we'll be done with the block. So we'll do this to the rest of them. And we'll get these pieces sewn, and then we're almost done. All right, so I can see this is basically how the finished block is going to look. So I'm going to go to the sewing machine, sew these cut sides together, press them, and I'll come back, and you'll see that those will be our finished little blocks, and then we can sew everything else together. All right. All right, so I've got all my pieces done. Now I'm going to do, because they're completely done, so all I want to do is trim up these little dog ears, these little ends. And I would recommend making sure that they're as close to 2.5 inches square as possible. So now it's just assembling our block, our finished block. So these are going to go in the centers, like top center, bottom center, right center. And then we'll take our 2.5 inch background pieces. And that's it. That's our block. So you could, I guess, like other blocks, rearrange it a little differently. It's always fun to play with some of the arrangements just to see what look you get, because you never really know until you do it. That's a neat one too. That one's actually really, really neat. Honestly, I think I like that way better than the way I did it. So you can put it together however you want. It's the same order. It's just however you flip these. And so all we're going to do is basically go to a sewing machine, sew this row together, sew this row together, and this row together, press them, and then sew these 3 rows together. So let me go sew each row, and we'll come back, press them, and then sew the 3 rows together. All right, so we've got our 3 strips sewn together. Now we are going to press them. And so, like I always say, press to the dark side, but there are some cases that pressing to the lighter side is a better option for the block itself. In some cases, you've got so many different light fabrics that it doesn't really matter. And this is kind of one of those cases. So we've got so many different light fabrics here that it doesn't matter if you press to the light side or to the lighter side, you're still going to see it. So in this case, this the top and the bottom row prefer to be pressed to the white side or the background side because it lays so much flatter instead of pressing towards all this bulk, all this piecing. So we'll do that for the top and the bottom. And of course we know the center row has to be pressed in the opposite direction as our top and bottom. So in that case, they're going to be pressed in. But here you've got a lot of piecing inside and a lot of piecing on the other side. So here, pressing it open or pressing it to one side or the other doesn't really matter because it's bulky regardless. But we're going to press it in so these top and bottom rows can interlock much easier. And then you're basically done. So you just have to sew these 3 rows together. And your 6.5 inch block number 9 is complete. As you can see here, that's it. So I'll go sew this together and I'll show you what it looks like in the end. So here we are. I finished sewing block number 8. I just need to press my seams, and here I'm going to press them open like I typically do. And then that is it. That is the finished block number 9. Hopefully everybody enjoyed making this block. This is definitely one of the more challenging blocks. There's no doubt about that compared to some of the other blocks that we've worked with. But hopefully you still enjoyed it nonetheless. So remember, if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and stay tuned for the next 2 blocks in the next coming 2 weeks. And then we'll be just about done with this quilt along using the Creative Grid Lazy Angle Ruler. All right, as always, happy sewing.